All right, today we're going to dive into one of the wildest intellectual riddles of the 20th century. It's the story of a man who looked like a beggar, but was the secret teacher to geniuses. A man with no name, no home, who somehow seemed to hold all the knowledge in the world. This is the incredible mystery of Monsieur Shushani.
I mean, just listen to this description from one of his most famous students, the Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel. And that's the central puzzle of Shushani, right? This guy who looked homeless, who was, often kind of repulsive to look at, had one of the most brilliant minds of his entire generation. How does that even happen?
And look, when I say powerful, I am not kidding. This wasn't just some smart guy. This strange, wandering figure was the secret mentor to absolute giants. We're talking Elie Wiesel, of course, the great philosopher Emmanuel Levinas, the scholar André Neher, and every single one of them said that meeting Shushani completely changed their lives, just fundamentally altered their work forever.
Okay, just let this sink in for a second. This quote from Levinas is just wow. It perfectly gets at the almost superhuman level of Shushani's intellect. Think about it. His students were geniuses themselves, but they talked about him with this complete awe. It was like he wasn't even just a man, but a walking, talking library of all human knowledge.
So let's get into some of the stories, because honestly, they sound like something out of a movie. They are just almost unbelievable, but you have to hear them to understand how this guy became such a legend.
Okay, let's start with a number. 30. What's 30? That's how many languages his students said he spoke, fluently. And we're not talking, French, English, the usual suspects. No. We're talking ancient Tibetan, Aramaic, Hindi, Hungarian. And get this, he could just switch between them like flipping a channel and would even change his Yiddish accent to match whoever he was talking to. Just incredible.
And his memory? Oh man, it was legendary. People said he'd memorized the entire Talmud, both versions, not to mention the core text of Kabbalah like the Zohar and even the Hindu Vedas. I mean, his students swore he would teach for 12 hours straight, just diving into these incredibly complex texts, and never once, never opened a book. It was all just in his head, ready to go.
But this next story, this is the one that really shows his genius in action. It's World War II. He gets arrested in Paris by the Gestapo. They accuse him of being Jewish. So what does he do? He makes this incredibly bold claim. He says he's a devout Muslim. So they bring in the big gun, the Grand Mufti of Paris himself, to interrogate him. They spend hours in this deep, intense debate about the Quran. And when it's over, the Mufti comes out and declares Shushani is a Muslim holy man and demands they release him immediately. He literally debated his way out of a Gestapo prison. Unbelievable.
So, okay, these stories are absolutely mind-blowing. But really, they just make the mystery even deeper, don't they? I mean, a mind like that doesn't just appear out of thin air. It all boils down to one huge question. Who was this guy? And maybe even more importantly, why was he trying so hard to hide who he was?
Well, for decades, people have been trying to figure that out. Researchers, journalists, even his own students, they've all tried to piece this puzzle together. It's become a real-life historical detective story, with people chasing these tiny clues across different continents, digging through old, dusty archives, all just to find the real person behind the Shushani mask. And eventually, all that digging really narrowed it down to two main theories. The first name that popped up was Mordecai Rosenbaum. Elie Wiesel actually managed to squeeze that name out of him once, but it was probably just another fake name, another alias. But the second theory, now this one was way more interesting. It pointed to a man named Hillel Perlman. And unlike Rosenbaum, Hillel Perlman was a real person, with documents and everything. He was a famous child prodigy who, after this incredibly bright start, just poof, vanished from the historical record back in the 1920s.
So let's follow the breadcrumbs on this Hillel Perlman theory, because this is where a forgotten genius from the past starts to look a lot like our mysterious wanderer from the 20th century.
Okay, so check out the timeline of Perlman's life. It lines up perfectly with Shushani's missing years. This kid was born a child prodigy back in 1895. He was so smart that he was handpicked for this super elite school for geniuses, run by none other than the legendary Rabbi Kook. But then World War I hits. He flees to the US, and after that, nothing. He just disappears from all official records. Gone.
And trust me, this kid was not just some average student. We have a letter that Rabbi Kook himself wrote trying to get some support for his young student in the US. Listen to how he describes him. A vessel of delight, a treasure. He was worried that such wonderful talents would be wasted because of poverty. I mean, this was a mind that everyone knew was destined for something huge.
So there are three key pieces that really seem to lock this all in place. First, Perlman's school was unique. It taught secular stuff like math and philosophy, which would explain where Shushani got all his non-religious knowledge. Second, and this is the big one, the smoking gun. After Shushani died, Perlman's own nephew came forward and positively identified the body as his long-lost uncle, Hillel. And finally, if you look at photos, the facial similarities between the young Perlman and the old Shushani are pretty striking. For most people looking into this, that was it. Case closed.
But, okay, knowing who he was just opens up an even bigger question, right? What was the point of it all? What did he actually leave behind? And that brings us to his legacy, which, you guessed it, is just as weird and mysterious as his life was.
You'd think a guy with a brain like that would leave behind shelves full of books, right? Maybe start his own school of thought. But Shushani? He left nothing. Well, almost nothing. All he left were dozens of notebooks, and they are bizarre. They're filled with this tiny, microscopic handwriting, packed with cryptic formulas, strange diagrams, weird lists, and to this day, nobody has been able to fully figure them out. They're like these strange artifacts from a massive intellect, but they don't give us any answers.
And this, right here, might be the real core of his legacy. A lot of people now believe his entire life was the lesson. His crazy appearance, his homelessness, the fact that he refused to write anything down clearly. It was all an act, a performance. The form was the content. Think about it. By being a homeless guy, he was showing that real knowledge doesn't just belong in fancy universities. By being so difficult and provocative, he was teaching that to really learn something, you have to be shaken up. And those unreadable notes? Maybe that was his way of saying the deepest truths can't just be written in a book. They have to be lived.
So that leaves us with this one last big question. Was his silence, his mystery, his ultimate teaching? Was he trying to send a message that the greatest truths aren't the ones you can write down, but the ones you have to live out? Relentlessly and, well, brilliantly. It's a riddle. And honestly, he's the only one who ever knew the answer.